The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to a brand new edition of The Lifted Embargo. I'm your host, Billy Donnelly. You can find at thisisinfamous.com. And this is the podcast where we review the latest movies that'll be coming to your theaters this coming weekend. So you'll have a chance to get an opinion as to whether or not you should maybe check something out that's hitting the theaters or not. Every single week, I like to bring in a different critic to offer up another perspective, another opinion, in addition to mine. And this week, it's no different, except I'm bringing back one of my old favorites. And you can find her work at Sassy Mom in LA, as well as freshfiction.tv, and follow her on Twitter at Lula May Bell. So my friend Courtney Howard joins me this week. Courtney, thank you very much.
Hi again, everybody. Thanks again for having me. It's so much fun.
Well, it is fun. That's why I invited you. If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't look you up.
Yes.
When it comes to that, I'd be like, oh yeah, that one that didn't work out so well. So let's lose that contact information. This week we have two films that we're going to talk about, two major films that are hitting wide release this week. There are a number of other films that are also hitting out there in limited release, films like The Dressmaker, Queen of Catway, which we'll be talking about in a future episode. So you can look into some of those films that are out there, as well as Audrey and Daisy, which is hitting Netflix as well. You can check into some of those other films that are out there and the reviews that are out there for them. But for this film, for this episode, rather, there are two films that we are going to have on the docket. One is the remake of the remake, The Magnificent Seven, and the other is the animated film Storks. So I think we'll start with the 2016 version of The Magnificent Seven. This is Antoine Fuqua's remake of the 1967 Western The Magnificent Seven, which in turn is a remake of the 1954 Seven Samurai film, the Kurosawa classic. This one stars Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke, Vincent D'Onofrio, Lee Byung-Hun, Manuel Garcia-Rulfo, and Peter Sarsgaard, in addition to Haley Bennett and Martin Sensmeyer. This film, once again, features a group of outlaws, bounty hunters, a number of people coming together under the common cause of saving this small town in 1879 by the name of Rose Creek from a robber baron who is trying to force out the population in order to ultimately take over the nearby gold mine and find that path to riches for himself. That's about as basic as The Magnificent Seven as I could get, as far as laying out what the premise of the film is for anybody who hasn't seen the original or the Seven Samurai. So, Courtney, right out of the gate, this version of The Magnificent Seven, what did you think of it?
I didn't think it was that bad. I was actually entertained. I thought it was a lot of fun. I had a good time during it. Even though it's super serious, I still found fun things in it. I liked the cast a lot. I liked the diversity in the cast, but I also liked those actors too. I thought they chose wisely for each of those roles. It would have been, as one of my friends had pointed out, it would have been interesting to see Matt Bomer actually switch roles with Chris Pratt. But, obviously Chris Pratt is the hot guy of the moment as far as getting him to be in your movie. So I get why he's there. I didn't find him he was more of an ensemble player. I've heard some people gripe about how they didn't really care for him in this movie, but I thought he was perfectly fine. But I think the stars of this movie are more Denzel and Ethan are great together. Obviously you saw that in Training Day, but here I think they're really good. But I also liked Byung-Hun Lee as well. I think he's fantastic, and I feel like the film came alive whenever they showed him, especially in terms of the cinematography, which was mostly just drab and dreary whenever he gets in the picture. And I also really liked Vincent D'Onofrio too in this as well. Like his like lilty voice was just bizarre, but I was digging it. He was creating a character, and it felt like we were watching something. And I had just watched. I'd never seen Seven Samurai before, and I had just watched the 1960 remake, the Americanized remake of it, like the night before. So just to have a little bit of comparison to kind of like look at. And I feel like this one did some things differently than that version did. Some things better, some things worse. But overall, I really had a fun time. What did you think?
I think it's okay.
It's not perfect.
It has its moments. I will give it that. I think it is too long. For one, and I mean, it clocks in about 133 minutes, which is only like 5 minutes longer than the original. But I think the original does a little bit more with the time to make it a little bit more meaningful. I think the film is cast fairly well in that you sort of have these eccentric caricatures of what the Magnificent Seven, 2016 version would become. So they're much more colorful. They have their own sort of identities, their own personalities, their own quirks that allow them to stand out. So Denzel is very much the noble man whose actions speak louder than his words in a number of ways. Chris Pratt, of course, is a little bit more comic relief, but he's the smart ass guy in the group. Ethan Hawke is also sort of brash. He's the legend of the crew. So I mean, they all fill their roles. You know, they all fill certain tropes, I guess, in compiling this version of the Magnificent Seven, and it is fun to watch them operate off each other. I liked Chris Pratt because I think he's good at sort of that wisecracking, snarky, smart-ass guy. And he fills it well. I mean, it's like taking Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy and putting him in the West. Like that.
I felt like he was trying to moderate, to calibrate that. Like, I didn't feel like he was, like, going overboard with the Star-Lord stuff. And I didn't feel like he was going overboard with his, like, Indiana Jones-ish role in Jurassic World. I felt like he was trying to calibrate whenever he was on screen to like what the scene needed. So, I mean, that's a mark of a good actor, but I don't know. He just wound up being there for me.
It's less over the top than he's been in the past, but enough to be noticeable. Enough where it's not where he's not bland.
Right.
So in that respect, like I like some of the interaction. Like I like the interactions between him and Denzel, and obviously you're having, it's a little bit more modern because you have people dropping like one-liners and zingers every once in a while, which is what modern audiences would like. I think that Peter Sarsgaard, especially in sort of the film's prologue, is really solid as a villain. It's like a 10-minute prologue, and you brought up Matt Bomer. I think it's a real good way to establish sort of the stakes that this town is operating under, and I like that aspect of it. But for me, what sort of is the undoing of the film is you have this real long stretch. So, okay, they hire these seven, and then you have this stretch where you accumulate the seven, you build your team, and you have a sort of an extended introduction of each of these characters as they're sort of brought into the fold, which is fine. Then when they sort of get to the town and they set up shop there, there's a great sequence. And I think Fuqua really makes the most of sort of what a Western does well in sort of this initial standoff between the seven and Bartholomew Bogue's men who are holding down the town. There's a lot of close-up shots of just guys looking at each other, moving their hands towards their weapon. Basically. Yeah. And it's not even the showdown. The action part of the showdown is just sort of whatever. It's all the anticipation of leading to the showdown that I think is really good. Then when they sort of take up the town, it's sort of, for me, runs out of gas because now they're waiting for more men to come and take the town back. And there's this sort of, it's like an extended montage almost, except it's not a montage. They actually show every step of the way of sort of training the town folk to fight, setting up what their tricks are going to be. It's sort of building to that conclusion. It's for me, it's just, there's not a lot of material there. And it takes a long time to sort of get through all of this to get to the ultimately the final showdown. And I just didn't find it as interesting because there's also not a lot of character stuff in here to sort of fulfill it other than some throwaway stuff. So now you introduce a couple of things about sort of Ethan Hawke and sort of the PTSD he's suffering from dealing with the war when he was a sharpshooter. You have sort of Denzel's motivations for why he's involved in taking up this cause, even for very little money. And when they do it, they're throwaway lines. Like they're just sort of mentioned briefly, and there's not a lot of examination to it to give these characters any real meat on their bones to make the film anything more than just sort of a casual action Western built upon the charisma of the cast who we like to watch. So in that respect, I do agree that there are some moments that are really fun to watch. I think the first half of the film is a lot of fun. Towards the end, it just sort of ran out of gas for me.
Mm-hmm. I liked that the characters weren't over-explaining their motivations and why they're there. I liked that they just did a quick little synopsis of even Vincent D'Onofrio's character. We learned that, he had a wife once. And it just kind of like, hey, I had a wife, and then he gets interrupted by something else. So you learn about these characters like a little bit by, just a little at a time. And I like that I wasn't like bombarded with exposition about, oh, you see that guy over there? This is what he did. And this is what happened to him and why he's traumatized. So I liked that they didn't lay it all out, that it was just sort of like they still kept some things in their heads. I had different gripes. Like I had different things that bothered me more, like the way Fuqua captured the action didn't really do it for me. Like he would cut away when it would be more beneficial to leaving the camera there at that moment and seeing the action be followed through. And I had problems with the cinematography being like, obviously like he wants to make a gritty Western, but like some of the scenes were so dark and so grainy where it was like hard to even see the performers doing their performances. Like there's two scenes of Denzel where I was like, is he in this scene? Like it's cool to see him silhouetted, but like I want to see his face in this scene, like to see how he's coming across, like, to see all of the tools of his, in his toolbox actually going to work. And I feel like that got compromised a little bit. And I didn't feel like it captured like the epic scope and scale of the West that lots of modern Westerns have done. Like Slow West did it beautifully, and Hateful Eight and Django Unchained, like where there's this dangerous beauty in the landscape. And I didn't feel like this really captured that as well as, the Americanized remake did. And, also, again, speaking to the characters, I did like in the original, the Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen relationship. I liked their back and forth and how they were kind of like, their little like jibes at each other or whatever. Like they had a really nice relationship in that film. I didn't quite get that between Pratt and Denzel, but I get they're different characters. So I liked that there's goods and bads to these things, and bads for me were like more, it's more mixed than anything rather than bad. But there's some definite ugly parts that needed fixing in this movie as well.
Yeah, the action definitely doesn't do anything for me in this film. It's not really cool. There's nothing really innovative about any of it. It's just sort of there. So like I said, when you have this first initial standoff and the anticipation of it, I think is really solid.
Correct.
The payoff doesn't match the build. The build is so much better than the payoff that then it makes the payoff disappointing. Because everything leading up to it is so good. So and if you're gonna and granted, there's only so much you can necessarily do with like a gunfight, okay? Especially a Western gunfight. If you want to keep it grounded in being a Western. I mean, you could do all sorts of things if you want to sort of introduce these fantastical elements, but you're going to start to then lose people who came to see a Western. I mean, there's even a scene where they bring out a Gatling gun, which is like sort of pushing it because it just doesn't feel of the rest of the film. By that point you're like, the film's almost over, so you're like, all right, I'll go with it. But it's a real stretch. Like they're really pushing the line as far as what would be believable in a Western of this sort. It's more like in that respect, it's more like Wild Wild West, where you start to bring in like a giant mechanical spider that doesn't feel like it fits within the rest of what they want the film to be. So I think there are aspects of that. I would disagree with you on some of the character stuff because I think in order for some of the characters to be a little bit more meaningful, not that they had to go into like deep backstory, but I think more than just like 2 lines to just be like, oh, so that's why, or oh, that's why this. Like there's untapped potential to a lot of that, particularly in sort of the Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke situation, where you sort of get into Ethan Hawke as Goodnight Robichaud and why this supposedly legendary sharpshooter is having trouble engaging in a gunfight with his life on the line. He's sort of shell-shocked in a number of ways. He is gun-shy and not ready to pull the trigger, which at that point is dangerous for not only himself, but everyone around him who is counting on him to sort of get their back and to look out for them. So I think that those aspects I think there's something more there that could have been done that would have made it more interesting. I would have rather had more of that and sort of just elaborating on these characters a little bit more, examining them a little bit more and sort of their motivations for what they're doing here than watching sort of townsfolk bumbling as they learn that they can't really shoot weapons of any sort. Because all that's really doing is like setting up the underdog story of well, look, they're still going to be able to rise up against the big bad guys. When I think having something a little bit more to the people who are going to ultimately take the brunt of the action anyway, I think just adds some more stakes to them and what it is that they're facing. Because, none of them really, I mean, some of them have it, like Vincent D'Onofrio's character, as you mentioned, is sort of a guy who, he doesn't have anything left in his life. Like what he used to do is he used to go out and scalp Indians who were a threat to the white man at that point in time. And now that he can't do that anymore, he's got a lot of fight in him, but no fight to have. So he has another cause. But they're just little things that are sort of thrown in that I wish they would have elaborated more on to make the characters a little bit more 3-dimensional as opposed to sort of just flat caricatures at times. If that makes sense.
It does make sense,
Yeah.
but I beg
Not
to
for you.
differ.
Okay. Fair enough.
We agree to disagree.
Fair enough.
One of my favorite stuff in the movies were some of the like Nick and I always get it saying his name wrong, last name wrong, Pizzolatto. His like very Pizzolatian like phrases that are peppered throughout. Like a few of them, like I was just giggling because I thought it was just it's so Western, but it's also so like such things that Dr. Phil might say too. So like lines like, you can cut the ears off a horse, but that don't make him a mule. And if God don't want him sheared, he wouldn't have made him sheep. And like, stuff like that. Like, I was like, yes, stuff, more of this Dr. Phil talk, please.
Yeah, because it is kind of like hammy, but it fits the characters in the
Completely.
moment. Because like the film isn't too serious. Like that's the thing about this film, is like it's not too serious, but it's serious enough. So it's not like jokey, and even though there are some funny lines in it and some lighter moments, but it doesn't treat the material as sort of just, well, this is just here so we could have done a Western. It is pretty respectful towards trying to be as close to a Western as it could possibly be. And in that respect, I think that's sort of where it succeeds. I just think it runs out of gas in the moments where I wish there was a little more substance over style. And on top of that, I wish there was more Peter Sarsgaard in it. Because the fleeting few moments you get with him, where he's just this ruthless guy out for gold, I think are really good. Because he's cutthroat. He's a dick. He is willing to sell anyone down the river if it means him bettering himself just a little bit more. And like I said, the prologue I thought was really solid. I think Haley Bennett as Emma Cullen, who is essentially the driver of the Magnificent Seven. She is the one who ultimately leads to the Magnificent Seven being hired to begin with. I think she grounds the film emotionally by sort of offering up a reason why this crew is necessary, and puts a personal touch on it, as opposed to just like, well, they took over the town. Like, she has a legitimate reason why that vengeance should be sought. So overall, it's fine. Like, I had I had moments that I really dug. I had moments that drove me absolutely nuts. And in the end, would I watch it again? If it was on TV, I'd probably watch it again. Like, if I ever caught this if this was one of those like Saturday afternoons on TNT, I would totally watch The Magnificent Seven again. I don't know that I would go out of my way to watch it again, though. But if it was on in front of me, I wouldn't turn it off.
I liked it in the grand scale of like Westerns that I like The Quick and the Dead and Tombstone and stuff like that, Sergio Leone movies. I would watch this again, but it doesn't quite rank up there at the top of the list. This is definitely flawed, but I like seeing Westerns every now and then. I don't want it to be a genre that dies because no one goes. But I feel like it just could have been a little bit more than what it is.
Yeah, see, I would watch The Quick and the Dead over this. And The Quick and the Dead is ridiculous at times. Downright ridiculous.
Completely.
But I love it for that. So, so in that respect, yeah, for me, I would give Magnificent Seven a minor recommendation. I think that there is some fun to be had out of this. It's okay. I wish it was better. But it's by no means terrible. It's watchable. And you'll get some entertainment value out of it. And Denzel is always good to watch. So
I hope they pull quote you on. It's watchable.
Yeah, it's watchable. Put that on the post. Put that on your TV spot. The Magnificent Seven. Donnelly says it's watchable. As most movies are for anyone who has two eyes, or even one eye, you could get by with. But in this case, yeah, it's fine. It's all right. So that's the Magnificent Seven, the 2016 version. As far as the other film we're going to talk about, that is Storks. This is the film by Warner Animation Group, and this is written and directed by Nicholas Stoller. And this stars Andy Samberg, Kelsey Grammer, Katie Crown, Key and Peele, Jennifer Aniston, Ty Burrell, as well as Danny Trejo. And this is a film about, the title, I think, it says it all, Storks. Sort of a buddy comedy, but pairing a stork and a human being together as they must deliver the last baby of sorts requested by Stork Delivery. Hijinks and shenanigans ensue as people try to stop them from their mission, as, of course, the opposites of the buddy comedy work their magic against each other in trying to come together as a team while also sabotaging each other at times. Yeah, that's Storks for you. Courtney, how did Storks do for you?
I didn't like it. There's some stuff in it that I did like that mostly comes in at the very, very end. But overall, I didn't like this at all. I thought it was a complete mess. It looked beautiful, and I liked the animation style, which seemed a little reminiscent of like Looney Tunes and Wile E. Coyote, the way that they moved around, especially the whole like sequence with the wolves that are voiced by Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele, and their whole like absurdity. But I think the stuff that Nicholas Stoller was doing is completely like, it just seemed to me that this is a person who doesn't understand how animation works. And I feel like the stuff that he does, it was so odd to me because I like all of his live action movies. I feel like they have a good balance of humor and heart in them, like the Neighbors franchise and Forgetting Sarah Marshall and the Muppets and 5-Year Engagement. I think he gets those tones right in those movies. But in this animated movie, it's just very heavy on just laughs. And the emotional stuff did not work for me at all. I didn't care about any of these characters at all from the very start. Like, there was nothing telling me or showing me, more importantly, why I should even care about any of these people. Like, I didn't care about Junior. He didn't seem like he even wanted that promotion. Like, it was just, hey, you're up in line for the promotion. And, like, I don't know. I just didn't like any of these people. I didn't like the human kid on Earth. Like, he's got some funny lines that I think resonate, but I just didn't really care for him. The parents that are like workaholics, like he was like, I'm going to guilt you. And then they turn immediately. And I don't know, just nothing about this movie worked for me. Except for at the very end, I loved the ending montage where they actually made a ballsy choice too. And it's sad that I have to point this out, that it's a ballsy choice, but to have not just heteronormative couples shown in the montage of like what makes up a family, but they also have a gay couple in there, a lesbian couple. They have all different kinds of races in there. And I think that's beautiful. And representation is important. And I did sort of like the Tulip character, that she's, this independent woman who's smart and intelligent, and she likes building things. And I think that's good for kids to see, because that might inspire them to go home and start building things and creating things. But overall, it just still sort of felt like pandering to me. But I just still didn't really care about her character and her whole character arc of her whole story is that she's this orphan girl because she didn't get delivered by her stork, because the stork messed up the delivery of her human home. And so she's been forced to live at Stork Mountain for 18 years, and she's too bumbly and she needs to be fired. So Junior's tasked with firing her, but he can't do that because he's sort of a weenie, I guess. So he just puts her somewhere else and havoc ensues with her. But I just didn't really like her quest of, I need to get back to my family, comes so late in the movie, where I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is your thing. It's not just delivering this baby. It's, I need to go find my family. Like, it just felt like a last ditch effort. Like, a lot of the emotion just felt like a last ditch effort. And I think that's what's so great about Pixar movies and some other animated films, where emotion is woven throughout the film. But I don't know. I don't know. I just didn't like this. This wasn't good for me.
Yeah, it wasn't good for me either.
Okay,
I
good.
I am not a fan of this movie. I don't think it is good in any way, shape, or form. Um, my main gripe with it is that it's just really not very funny. It
Hmm.
is not entertaining at all. It seems like jokes are written to try to be made funny as opposed to being anything organic that would actually come out of any of these characters' mouths.
Hmm.
And as a result, none of it connects. It all
Hmm.
falls flat. I felt like this was like 90 minutes of watching a movie bomb just in front of me because not, like it's some of it's just groan inducing. And it's
Hmm.
just not it's not clever. On top of that, you're sort of dealing with, they try to sort of modernize the sort of the stork legend. But have we ever really gotten to a point where people truly believe that storks were delivering babies? That we need to sort of bring that up to speed in 2016, where because even
I was
then,
thinking that. I was like, do parents actually tell their kids this
no,
anymore?
nobody does. And what makes it even worse is that even the parents aren't old enough to have bought into that sort of bullshit. So in that respect, like one of the great for me, one of the more darkly humorous moments, which the film does unintentionally, is when the one kid, the main kid, whose name is, let me bring it up. Hunter. No, is it? No, it's not Hunter. It
Hunter
is.
is the
That's the kid.
boss.
Let's see. Nate. Nate is
Junior?
the Nate is
Oh,
the little
Nate.
kid.
Yeah.
He tells his parents that he has written a letter to the Storks for them to deliver him a baby brother, and the parents look at each other with like this quizzical look, and all I could think in watching that moment was they're really mad that they can't even have the sex that's going to bring about another kid because the stork has cock blocked the two of them. And it's just like this, it's just this odd thing because number one, you have to really buy into the stork mythology to begin with
Yes.
for the film to sort
Yeah.
of go anywhere. And I took my two kids to watch it because when films like of this nature come about, I go, well, let me also see how this would play
Yeah.
for a different audience because
Hmm.
while it's not a Pixar movie, which can sort of play four quadrant wise, this maybe it's not for me. Maybe it's for somebody else. And they seem sort of puzzled by the whole stork idea to begin with. I haven't had the conversation about where babies come from, but I'm pretty sure they know it's not via storks delivering them. So
What?
yeah, so you have just sort of that, like it's a pretty big thing to put out there, and have it just sort of not work. And then on top of that, yeah, you have the human who like always screws things up. This sort of bumbling character who's meant to be sort of the comic relief of the pairing, while the stork that she's paired with, Junior, who's Andy Samberg's voice, he's sort of the straight laced, we need to get things done, we're on a mission, sort of. I gotta follow orders, So you have just those two dynamics that make up a buddy comedy. But I've seen buddy comedies all of my life. This is not a good one. So
Hmm.
so that and
Yeah.
that's a problem because if you don't really fully understand the mission, and I think also the mission is sort of clouded. You have sort of this idea of how Tulip was left behind because or was raised by storks because the stork that was supposed to deliver her, as the story goes, sort of went nuts and fell in love with her and tried to keep her. And now that the storks have sort of gone rogue, that's why they no longer deliver babies anymore. They deliver electronics and packages like they're Amazon. So you have like that element mixed in here, and then you sort of have this trying to find one sense of self, their role in the world, what their purpose is, what they're meant to do. And it really just sort of clouds the whole thing. The movie's just trying to do too much with these characters who really should just be trying to deliver a baby. even the creation of the baby is sort of convoluted,
Mm-hmm.
with this sort of side
Absolutely.
story with the kid and his workaholic parents. And while there were a couple of things that I liked, a couple of moments that I did get a kick out of, I thought the wolf pack formations were pretty creative. I thought that was a different spin on adding some of these more cartoonish elements in this film. There's also a what I thought to be a tremendous action sequence with penguins, where the baby is sleeping, and as a result, the fight takes place in utter silence, so that the baby isn't woken up. And I thought that was pretty funny. But other than those two moments, I can't really point to anything else from this film where I was like, that did something for me. The rest of it, it felt like just moving pictures on a giant screen in front of me while my eyes glazed over.
Yeah.
And then when it was over, I got to pretend that I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd also like to point out that the quiet fight reminded me a lot of, kids won't get it, but adults will. The other guys, when they have the quiet fight at the wake, that reminded me a lot of that. So I feel like that was a sort of recycling. But yeah, I completely agree. Like, there's a lot where it's just like, this isn't landing. I'm not finding this really funny. And then in those moments, which it does all really come down to, is this funny? And so when it's not funny, all you do is kind of start focusing on the world building aspect. And I think that it's interesting, like, all animation seems to have this, like, and Pixar describes it this way too, this what if question, like, what if ... and then you fill in the blank. And I think Warner Animation's, like, goal with this, their what if question, was the right question, but I think that they answered it completely wrong. Like you said, it's completely convoluted. There's so many contrived things. There's so many, like, ingredients added at the last minute. The world building just really threw me. Like, none of it was making sense to me. Like, if all the Storks stopped delivering babies the last 18 years, how are there toddlers? Like, I know how, real kids get made, but, like, how are there even toddlers? If, like, why are the stork babies not newborns? They're like 6-month-old kids when they're born. Like, why are they not brand new? What's the reasoning for that? What's the logic? If storks live, like, where do they live when they're not at work? Like, do they live at Stork Mountain? Are they always at work? Do they work 24/7? Are these slave labor things? How did they universally decide to value capitalism over family? And why do they even care about money? They are birds who have no use for it. Like, why is this even a thing,
Yeah, it's one of those situations where as you recognize very quickly that the movie is bad, you have to then fill the void by really stripping down this world into sort of the ridiculous elements that make it up. For me, it's similar to, like, when I watch the Cars movies in the Pixar universe, which I find to be atrocious, easily their worst efforts. Rather than watch them, now I start to pose questions about who made this world and what kind of rules were set about it. Why do the cars eat? Why do they need to go to the bathroom? Why are cars inside just driving around as opposed to just, like, why do all of these elements come together? And I think that's similar to what happens with Storks, is that really quickly you recognize this is not a good film. And then you start to just peel apart the layers of the world and go, well, that doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense. Why is this movie so stupid?
And I hate to be that person who's, like, deconstructing the world, but the world that they're building is not strong enough to hold whatever story they're trying to lay out. And so I immediately just, if I can't get into the world, I'm not going to get into your movie. Sorry, that's just the way it is. Like,
I mean, the problem is that it's just not entertaining enough. If a film is entertaining and keeps you laughing, as a film like this, I would imagine is built to do, you can ignore those things. You can overlook them because you're you're in whatever the film is being called upon you to do. And as a result, you'll suspend disbelief to a certain degree and say, you know what? Fuck it. I'm in on it. Storks are delivering packages like Amazon? Sure, whatever. They got little pigeon Toady as this sort of boss guy. Fine, I'll go with it. But when it doesn't work, then all you're left to do is say, well, that is not very good, and that's not very good, and sort of point out overwhelmingly the flaws that accumulate to make a film like this terrible. You know, entertainment and laughs are forgiveness. You know, they're the medicine for films that may not always come together, but you're willing to overlook in the name of your entertainment value. This doesn't provide any of that. So the flaws are glaring. They are huge holes in this film. And as a result, it is impossible to overlook them because the film is giving you nothing else to sort of help patch those holes in the film.
The kids in our screening were going nuts. Like, they loved it. Like, they were laughing. And I mean, there was maybe one moment where I laughed the loudest at something that kids did not even understand. It was some kind of adult joke. I don't even remember what it was. But that was the only time I truly laughed. But the kids were going nuts in our screening. They loved like the pigeon toady stuff. And I was like, what are you guys laughing at? I don't get
something
it.
Is in the water.
Differently. So I don't know what your kids thought of it, but it seems like it's something for kids and that kids will like, but the parents will be, you know, just groaning in an agony when they're watching it.
My kids seem to be fairly disengaged from it.
Okay.
I didn't really find them to be all that into what was happening. Not really a lot of laughs as to what they saw. Not really all that into the story either. Like as far as what was happening to any of them, I think it sort of not went over their heads, but I felt like they didn't care. And I've watched them watch movies before. I felt like this was one of those ones they weren't into, as opposed to sort of the Lego Ninjago short that played before the film, which they were laughing at. So in that respect, I was able to sort of use that as a measure. When I saw this film, Warner Brothers actually played the brand new trailer for the Lego Batman movie in front of it. So that was maybe about a minute and a half. If I could have watched that for about an hour and a half on repeat, I think it would have done better than what Storks did. And I think that also goes for the kids, because I think they dug what they saw of Lego Batman. I think they dug what they saw of the Ninjago short. I think they did not dig what they caught for Storks. And based on the premise alone, and then sort of the execution of that premise in this film, I don't know who the hell this movie's for. I don't know who they thought would sort of rally behind this film. As far as Storks being Storks, doing Stork things, which is not really a thing in the public consciousness anymore. Yeah, I am not a fan of this movie. I would recommend you take your kids outside to play over sitting inside a theater for 89 minutes and paying money to watch this.
Yeah, I think it's gonna, like, I think the unfortunate thing is I think it's gonna make a ton of money because there's not any competition out there currently for them. Like real competition. Like there's not another Pixar movie out. There's not another Disney movie out for a couple weeks. There's nothing competing against it. Where
you
gotta
wait till Trolls, right? I think Trolls is the next one up.
So this is going to do a ton of money, and I think that the studio's of course going to conflate. Oh, well, this is doing a ton of money, so let's greenlight more movies like this, without actually like, you know, this movie it really isn't very good. And I feel terrible because the co-director of this film, like, he comes from an animation background. It's Doug Sweetland, who won, I think he won for Presto. I think he won an Oscar for Presto, or at least it was nominated. So he has this Pixar pedigree, and he seems to know what he's doing with the animation. But I just kind of felt like maybe any ideals of like how, and like even the producer of this movie comes from, I think he's from DreamWorks. So it's so bizarre to me that, I admire that they're trying to do something new with kind of getting a non-animation guy in there, Nicholas Stoller, into the mix and seeing what he can bring. But the live action world and the animation world are so different. There's such different creative mediums where you can't necessarily bring the stuff like riffing in a recording booth. You cannot do that. Like, it needs to be hard lines. You need to know what you're doing. So like, you're not wasting 3 hours of time just to get 3 minutes of dialogue that doesn't exactly work on screen. Do you know what I mean? And that's how I feel like a lot of these, like the buddy comedy, like scenes, like anything in this ship that Tulip built, that Junior's in, and they're like just going back and forth and arguing with each other and such.
It's excruciating.
It's excruciating. It's painful. It's painfully awkward. Like, nobody's laughing. There's no fun. It's just arguing and bickering. And
it's
I
not
don't
even
want to hear it.
And it's not even fun bickering. Like it's not like if you were watching like De Niro and Grodin in Midnight Run. It's two people who are not even two people. It's a stork and a person who you're like, these people should stay far away from one another.
Right. Why are these people, like, I just kept thinking, why are these people even being put together in the same thing? I hate both of them. I want this ship to crash.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go real dark, real fast.
Which is never a good sign.
It's horrible. So I'm worried about this movie doing good, because I'm worried about what it's going to mean to people who work in animation for years to come, because there's also the Illumination model too, which is also eschewing any kind of emotional like arcs for characters for just pure zany comedy. And so I'm very worried about what this means for the future of animation.
I mean, it'll be like all the others. I'm sure we'll get 4 of these movies. It feels like What Storks feels like to me is like the worst of the DreamWorks animation tree. I know it comes from Warner, but it feels like one of those bad Ice Age movies or one of those bad Madagascar movies. I'd even put this on par with like Home.
The third Madagascar is genius, though. Have you seen the third Madagascar?
I think I wrote them off after.
Oh my God. You need to not watch 1 or 2. Just watch 3.
Watch 3.
So good. Like, I've watched all the other ones and I found them excruciating, but the third one is genius. Noah Baumbach wrote parts of the third one.
Okay, maybe I'll give that one a shot.
Not to thread jack this conversation, but like, you've got to watch the third Madagascar. It's absurdly hilarious.
Okay, we'll see.
But yes, Storks is part of the bad DreamWorks.
Yeah. It's
model.
like that model. It's like Home, from the Weinstein put out recently, which is just, it feels forced. It feels like it's pandering and talking down to kids in a number of ways. But I think kids are too smart for a movie like this, especially considering that. Look, there are some dumb kids out there. There are. Let's face it, and maybe they'll respond to this. But I think a lot of kids are smart, and as a result, I don't know that a film like this plays well to them. I don't know a film like this plays well to the people that have to take them to see it, and as a result, I hope that Storks gets shot down by Hunter, looking for quail, who mistakes this Storks for what their target is, and I never have to see any of these characters again. Never, ever, ever. Not one. Maybe
Sully's plane will take it down. Maybe they'll try to take the Sully's plane and at least like.
With any luck, it would then have taken both of those films down, and I don't think I'm going to get any such wish granted. So to recap, the 2 films that we saw this week, Magnificent Seven. It's fine. Courtney's a little bit higher up on it than I am. I think that there are some moments that will entertain you. But ultimately, I just wish the film was better. I think that there's untapped potential in this film, sort of left on the table, that I wish they would have gotten into a little bit more. But watching these characters operate as the Magnificent Seven, it has its moments. So in that respect, at least for me, I'd say slight recommendation. You're a little bit more in favor than I am. So so overall, though, Magnificent Seven, fairly positive. Storks, overwhelmingly negative. On the other side of the coin, none one of us can find anything really too positive about this movie to say, other than that the wolf pack is hilarious and there is a tremendous fight scene, but you have to sit through, the fight scene is probably about a minute and a half, which means you got to sit through like 86 and a half minutes of garbage just to get to the fight scene. Not worth it one bit. So in that respect,
and the montage at the end, I thought that's the other highlight.
That was only a highlight for me because it meant the movie was over. And I could leave. Even though I could have done that of my own free will earlier in the process, I was not strapped down to watch this. But I had to do my duty to tell the listeners of this podcast not to see it. Yeah. Look, I took the bullet for you here. Okay. So those are the two films. Choose wisely if you're going to pick out of one of them to see anything this weekend. Otherwise, there's always something else to do. Read a book. So before I let you go,
other Western movies, like go research Sergio Leone movies or something.
Watch the original Magnificent Seven. How about that?
Seven Samurai. Watch that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna watch that.
There you go. Even for your kids, put it on for them.
They're like Toshihiro Mifune. Yay!
Yeah, it's better than Storks. So, Courtney, before I let you go, let everybody out there know where they could find you on the interwebs.
You can find my scribblings on sassymamainla.com. The 2 reviews for this week are up on there. You can also find other reviews as well there and on freshfiction.tv. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at LulaMaybell.
So there you go. Make sure you follow all of Courtney's work as well as her pictures too on Instagram. And
my cute dog.
Well, there you go. And make sure you follow her dog. As far as us, make sure you follow us on social media as well, on Twitter at TisInfamous, at TIS Infamous. That is for our home base of This Is Infamous. So anytime a new podcast or any content goes up, you'll be notified on the Twitter feed. So make sure you follow us at TisInfamous. And for myself, at Infamous Kid, KIDD, 2 Ds at the end. Infamous Kid for all my random ramblings and musings, my stream of consciousness put into the written word in 140 characters or less, at Infamous Kid on Twitter. Facebook, 2 pages for you to like, facebook.com/tisinfamous and facebook.com/bullythekid. Always interesting discussion threads going on there, so participate and you'll get out what you put in. That's what they say, at least. So just like those 2 pages and get yourself involved.
Podcast. That's what she said.
Podcasts can be found wherever podcasts can be found. But you know that because you found this podcast. But if you want to find any other past podcasts or future podcasts, you can find it on your preferred distribution podcast model. So iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Blueberry, SoundCloud, you name it. Search for The Lifted Embargo, and then once you find it, all I ask is that you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. You get them all delivered to your mobile devices in an instant. And in addition to that, make sure you rate the podcast and you comment. So just take a couple of moments, give us 5 stars because we're 5-star worthy, and jot down a few words about what you think of what we're doing here. And I will greatly appreciate it for the rest of my life. Or at least until I forget that you did it, in which case you could remind me and I'll just appreciate it again. Other than that, you can find my work regularly at thisisinfamous.com, whether it's audio, video, or written. Always content going up there for you to check out. So I want to thank my guest, Courtney Howard, for joining me here on this particular episode of The Lifted Embargo. I have been your host, Billy Donnelly, and go out there and see something. If you see something that catches your eye, otherwise, don't. That's your prerogative. Have yourself a pleasant immediate future. We're out for now. Peace. The Lifted Embargo is a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.